And thanks to the folks assembled here around this table, we're making progress on two key fronts. First, we're doubling down on our work at home, starting right here, right now, with the launch of a new Council on Supply Chain Resilience. I'm charging this group to ensure that our supply chains remain secure, diversified, resilient, and into the future. I'm also directing my cabinet to create an early warning system that uses data to spot supply chains risks to our economic security, our national security, our energy security, and our climate security. And I'm proud to announce that I'll be invoking what's known as the Defense Production Act to boost production of essential medicines in America by American workers. Because you notice people had to get certain kinds of shots. It was not available. We had to get it overseas. Well, that supply chain is going to start here in America, here in America. We're going to help assure American families have reliable access to medicines they need. Second, we're doubling down on our work with global partners. 2 weeks ago, I signed the first of its kind supply chain agreement with 13 countries in the Indo-Pacific. This agreement is going to help us identify supply chain bottlenecks before they become the kind of full-scale disruptions we saw during the pandemic. We all saw what happened then. Semiconductor supply chains from Asia and America from Asia to America shut down. If this agreement had been in place back then, we've been able to avoid that. Folks, the result, today our supply chains are stronger than ever, with backlogs, bottlenecks, and shipping rates at a 25-year low. We've created 14 million new jobs, including 800,000 manufacturing jobs. And the unemployment rate has stayed below 4% for the longest stretch in over 50 years. And wages for working families have gone up while inflation has come down 65%, giving families a little more money in their pockets and a little more breathing room this holiday season. But we know the prices are still too high for too many things, that times are still too tough for too many families. But we made progress, but we have more work to do. Let me be clear. To any corporation that's not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop the price gouging and give the American consumer a break. Look, that's why I'm tackling junk fees, these hidden charges that companies sneak into your bill to make you pay more money just because they can, and you have no alternative. Junk fees take real money out of the pockets of average Americans. They can add up to hundreds of dollars, weighing down family budgets and making it harder for families to pay their bills. And they feel like they're being played for suckers, which they are. Over the past 2 years, my administration has taken steps to crack down on unfair and deceptive junk fees, from banking, hotels, retail housing, rental housing, cable networks, the internet, concerts, airlines, healthcare. Before the pandemic, supply chains weren't something most Americans thought about or talked about. But today, after years of delay in parts and products, everyone knows why supply chains are so important. That's why within my first month in office, I signed an executive order bringing supply chains home to get goods moving again. So it started here. We had the basic product here. Less than a year later, I signed the bipartisan infrastructure law to make a generational investment in every part of our supply chain, from our roads to our bridges to our ports to our airports to our internet. Less than a year after that, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act to grow the industries of the future right here at home, including electric vehicles and clean energy. And the CHIPS Act and the CHIPS and Science Act. How in God's name can you lead the world when you don't lead the world in science and development? To make sure we never experience another shortage of semiconductors. You know, America invented these chips. I know my staff is tired of hearing me say this in my cabinet, but these small computer chips the size of a fingertip, they affect nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones to automobiles, refrigerators. If you don't have them, you don't have those things. But over time, we went down from producing 40% of the world's chips to just doing 10%, but not anymore. All over the country, semiconductor factory companies are investing hundreds of billions, let me say it, hundreds of billions of dollars to bring chip production back home here to the United States. I also signed the first ever presidential memorandum on worker rights globally, a move that's going to address forced labor, promote worker health, worker wages, worker unions, as we build out our supply chains. Because we know our progress depends on our workers, including union workers. They keep our supply chain secure and our economies moving. So we have to do more and empower them here at home and around the world. Fortunately, we've been able to push back on MAGA Republicans so far, but they haven't given up. They haven't given up. They still want to undo this progress we're making. They're proposing cuts in investments in roads, bridges, the internet, and high-speed internet, the very things that provided from anyway. They're across the board. And the cuts that could result in loss of jobs and infrastructure and in manufacturing. And they want to go back to the bad old days when corporations looked around the world to find the cheapest labor they could find, to send the jobs overseas, and then import the products back to the United States. Now, we're building the products here and exporting products overseas. We're not importing jobs. Bottom line, they want to make the whole supply chain more vulnerable. Their plan would offshore jobs, raise costs for seniors by repealing the insulin price reduction, the caps on out-of-pocket drug expenses, and the ability to negotiate lower drug prices that I secured in the Inflation Reduction Act. Their plan would cut Social Security benefits. I thought we had this, they agreed not to do this a couple times, but they're back at it. Benefits, average benefit cut would be 13% for people, by 13%, those would be cut. Their plan would also cut Medicare while providing more tax giveaways to the wealthy and the biggest corporations. And my predecessors, once again, God love him, called for cuts that could rip away health insurance for tens of millions of Americans in Medicaid. They just don't give up. But guess what? We won't let these things happen. Let me close with this. You know, we faced some pretty tough times in recent years. But in America, there's no surrender, there's no giving up, there's no stopping. America never gives up. I've long said we're the only nation in the world that comes out of every crisis stronger than when we went into it, that crisis. I truly believe that 50 years from now, when historians are taking a look at this, looking back at this moment, when they look back on the work we're doing to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, to strengthen American supply chains and manufacturing workers all across the country, they're going to say that this was the beginning when America won the competition of the 21st century. I've never been more optimistic about our nation's future. We just have to remember who we are. You've heard me say it before, we are the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together.